different types of joins, set operation, trigger and its types, query processing, query optimization, hashing in DBMS, all we discuss in the last lectures. Okay. Today discuss the next topic, next chapter, transaction management and concurrency control and recovery. So basically, you have to understanding the database management system. What you have to do in this DBMS. You have to creating the database, you have to creating the table, you have to processing the queries, triggers, join, inner join, outer join, different types of joins will be there. So what you have to do this for the fast processing for your results. So today we will see the transaction management. What will be the managed various transaction for the database and what concurrency control and recovery. So basically, transaction management are set of operations used to perform logical set of works. अलग अलग operations रहते हैं इसके अंदर perform the logical set of work. It is a bundle of all instructions of logical operation. A transaction usually means that in the database has changed. One of the major uses of DBMS is to protect the user data. तो यूजर डेटा को क्या किया जाता है प्रोटेक्ट किया जाता है फ्रॉम सिस्टम फेल्यूअर्स जब आप वर्कआउट करते हैं तो सिस्टम में फेल्योरिटी आती है तो वो डेटा को प्रोटेक्ट होना चाहिए अगर सपोज आपने कुछ ट्रांजेक्शन किया और बीच में सिस्टम आपका बंद हो जाता है तो फिर भी आपके अकाउंट में से पैसा कट हो जाता है लेकिन वो बोलता है कि पैसा मुझे आया नहीं सामने वाली पार्टी बोलती है कि मुझे पैसा मिला नहीं और आपके अकाउंट से पैसा कट हो जाता है तो हु इज अ प्रोटेक्ट फॉर दिस प्रोटेक्ट द यूजर डेटा फ्रॉम द सिस्टम फेल्योर सिस्टम का डेटा जो है वो फेल्योर यूजर डेटा जो है वो क्या होना चाहिए प्रोटेक्ट होना चाहिए is ensuring that all the data is restored to consistent state when the computer is restarted after a crash. The transaction is a any one execution of the user program in a DBMS. One of the important property of the transaction is that it contains the finite number of steps. Executing the same program multiple times will generate multiple transactions. Executing the same program multiple times will generate multiple transactions. Consider the following example of transaction operation to be performed to withdraw cash from an ATM. Vestible. तो अभी फॉर एग्जाम्पल बताया कि सपोज ट्रांजेक्शन्स एटीएम में जाते हैं तो पैसे विड्रॉ करते हैं अमाउंट विड्रॉ करते हैं transaction operation to be performed to withdraw the cash from an ATM vestibule. Step for ATM transaction. First transaction start. Insert your ATM card. Select language for your transactions. Select the saving account options. Enter the amount you want to withdraw. Enter your secret PIN. Wait for some time for processing. Collect your cash. Transaction completed. तो इतने सारे स्टेप्स है आप एटीएम से पैसा निकालते हो तो transaction already started is there. Insert your ATM card. Select language for your transaction. Saving account options. Enter amount you want to withdraw. PIN, रहता है secret PIN, password, and wait for processing. Sometime you have to wait and collect your cash. Transaction is completed. तो ये steps है उसके actually. जब कोई भी कस्टमर या क्लाइंट एटीएम में जाते हैं तो या हम जो चाहते हैं तो वहाँ पे इस तरह के स्टेप हम फॉलो करते हैं। ट्रांज़ैक्शन कैन बी इंक्लूड द फॉलोइंग बेसिक डेटाबेस एक्सेस ऑपरेशन। तो ये जो ट्रांज़ैक्शंस रहते हैं, उसके कुछ बेसिक डेटाबेस एक्सेस ऑपरेशन रहते हैं। तो इसमें रीड एक्सेस डेटा एक रहता है। रीड और एक्सेस डेटा, accessing the database item from a disk, where the database stored data to memory variable. Access data, accessing the database item from disk, where the database stored data to memory variable. Write, change data, write कर सकते, change कर सकते. Write data item from the memory variable to the disk. Commit. Commit is a transaction control language that is used to permanently save the changes done in transactions. तो कमिट ये एक ट्रांजैक्शन कंट्रोल लैंग्वेज बोला जाता है दैट इज यूज्ड टू परमानेंटली सेव द चेंजेस डन इन द ट्रांजैक्शंस। तो एक बार आपने कमिट कर दिया तो क्या हो जाता है, चेंजेस जो है वो परमानेंटली सेव हो जाती है। जैसे हम कोई भी डॉक्यूमेंट टाइपिंग करते हैं, उसको सेव करते हैं, वापस टाइपिंग करके सेव एज करते हैं, तो परमानेंटली सेव हो जाते हैं। उसी तरह ये कमिट एक कमांड है। तो हम इससे क्या कर सकते हैं, परमानेंटली सेव द चेंजेस डन इन ट्रांजैक्शंस। एक एग्जांपल देखते हैं, यहाँ पे एग्जांपल बताया। ट्रांसफर रुपीज 50 रुपीज फ्रॉम अकाउंट ए टू बी। इनिशियली ए is equal to 500 rupees, b is equal to 800 rupees. This data is brought to RAM from hard disk. This data is brought to RAM from hard disk. RA is equal to means what, 500. R means what, access or read from RAM. A is equal to A minus 50, deducting of 50 rupees from A. A अकाउंट है, उसमें अमाउंट है कुछ, सपोज उस अकाउंट में से -50 किया, बेसिकली बैलेंस उसका 500 है सपोज। ओके, यहाँ पे आपको दिख रहा है कि आर ए इज इक्वल टू 500। तो ए जो है अकाउंट उसमें 500 है, ए इज इक्वल टू ए माइनस 50, मतलब डिडक्ट किया जाएगा 500 प्लस 50। तो अपडेट 450 इन रैम, आर बी इज इक्वल टू 800। अभी इसमें क्या करना है, ऐड करना है, बी इज इक्वल टू बी प्लस 50, 850 अपडेटेड इन रैम। Small comment. The data in RAM is taken back to hard disk. स्टोरेज ऑफ ट्रांजेक्शन एक डायग्राम बताया, वही हमें जो स्टेप लिखे थे वही यहाँ पे प्रेजेंट किया है। आर ए रीड्स अकाउंट बैलेंस ऑफ ए फ्रॉम डेटाबेस। ए ए minus 50 decrement the account balance of a from database by 50. Write updated back account balance to a DB. डेटाबेस में सब अपडेट होते रहता है। Again, RB reads account balance of B from DB. B equal to B plus 50. Increment account balance of B from DB by 50. WB. Transaction management and concurrency control and recovery. Write updates account balance of B from DB. Stages of transactions. The updated value of account A is equal to 450 rupees and account B is equal to 850 rupees. All instruction before committing come under a partially committed state and are stored in a RAM. When the commit is read, the data is fully accepted and stored on hard disk. तो स्टोरेज मतलब हार्ड डिस्क पे स्टोर होता है. So this is the follow what is steps. ये जो steps है उसी का यहाँ पे diagrammatically you have to well understand for here. Okay. The update of account A 450, account B 850. All instruction before committing come under a partially committed state as are stored in RAM. When the commit is read, the data is fully accepted and is stored on this hard disk. If the transaction is failed anywhere before committing, we have to go back and start from the beginning. We cannot continue from the same state. This is known as rollback. If the transaction is failed anywhere before the committing, we have to go back and start from the beginning. We cannot continue from the same state. This is known as rollback. Uses of transaction management. The DBMS is used to schedule the access of data concurrently. It means that the user can access the multiple data from the database without being inter, interfered with by each other. Transactions are used to manage concurrency. It is also used to satisfy the ACID property. It is used to solve the read-write conflict. तो ये मैनेजमेंट ट्रांजेक्शन मैनेजमेंट क्या करता है, उसके यूजेस क्या क्या है. तो एसिड प्रॉपर्टी यूज करता है, सेटिस्फाइड एसिड प्रॉपर्टी, रीड राइट कॉन्फ्लिक्ट सॉल्व करता है, is used to schedule the access of data concurrently. It means that users can access the multiple data from the database without being interfered with by each other. Transactions are used to manage concurrency. It is used to implement recoverability, serializability, and cascading. Transaction management is also used for concurrency control protocol and the looking of data. Advantage of using a transactions. Maintains a consistent and valid database after each transactions. Makes certain that updates to the database do not affect its dependability or accuracy. To advantage carried transaction using transaction maintain the consistent and valid database after the each transactions. Make certain that updates to the database do not affect its dependability or accuracy. Enables simultaneous use of numerous users without sacrificing data consistency. Desirable property of transactions asset property. तो asset property हमने लास्ट टाइम भी देखी थी, लास्ट मतलब रिपोर्ट पहले देखे थे. Again, see. Transaction management in a database management system ensure that database transactions are executed reliably and follow asset properties. तो जो आपका ट्रांज़ैक्शंस होता है, एग्ज़ीक्यूट होता है, दैट विल बी done and that will follow acid properties, atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. These principles help maintain the data integrity even during the failures or concurrent users interactions. Using that all the transactions are either fully completed or rolled back if errors occurs. For a transaction to be performed in a DBMS, it must possess several properties often called acid property. A for atomicity, C for consistency, I for isolation, D for atomicity state that all the operation of the transaction taken place at once if not. Transactions are aborted. There is no midway. That is, the transactions cannot occur partially. Each transaction is treated as one unit and either run to completions or is not executed at all. Atomicity involves the following two operations: abort. If transaction abort, then all the changes made are not visible. Commit. If transaction commits, then all the changes made are visible. Abort में क्या आता है? If transaction abort, then all the changes made are not visible. जो भी changes है वो not visible नहीं होते. Commit में क्या आता है? If transaction commits, then all the changes made are visible. Commit मतलब update होता है. Consistency.
सर
हाँ यस.
सर लेकिन कभी कभी एटीएम में ट्रांजैक्शन अबॉर्ट हो जाता है फिर भी वो स्लिप तो निकलती है।
हाँ निकलती है ना. उसमें लेकिन क्या रहता है स्लिप?
तो सर वो तो
फेल्योरिटी वगैरह कुछ
विजिबल हो गया ना फिर वो।
नहीं. मतलब यूजर को तो समझना चाहिए ना क्या हो रहा है. ट्रांजेक्शन विजिबल नहीं होता है, बराबर है. वहाँ पे आपको कुछ एरर बताएगा, मतलब ट्रांजेक्शन अबॉर्टेड आएगा ना. यूजर को मैसेज तो आना चाहिए ना, इसलिए वो स्लिप्स आता है वहाँ पे.
ओके।
हॅलो सर.
हाँ बोलो ना.
हा सर, म्हणजे मला असं वाटतं की कौशल असं म्हणतोय की हे एटीएमचं आहे ना, ट्रान्झॅक्शनचं, की कसलं आहे?
हाँ ट्रांजेक्शन मैनेजमेंट सिस्टम बरोबर.
हा, पण असं होतं की एटीएम मधून कधी पैसे काढले आपण, पैसे येत नाही, पण ट्रान्झॅक्शन कम्प्लीट होतं त्यावेळेस काय होतं एक्झॅक्ट?
हा मग त्याच्यासाठी जे सर्व प्रॉपर्टीज वगैरे आहेत त्या प्रॉपर्टीमुळे ते आपण म्हणजे ते फॉरवर्ड करू शकतात. जे बॅकएंड साईडला असतात, या आपले एसक्यूएल वगैरे जे असतात प्युरिफायर करणारे, ते ते सर्व मॅनेज करतात. ते सर्व ऍसिड प्रॉपर्टीची आहे. डिझायरेबल प्रॉपर्टी ऑफ ट्रांजेक्शन्स ऍसिड प्रॉपर्टी. तो ऑटोमॅटिकली में कंसिस्टन्सी, आयसोलेशन, ड्युरेबिलिटी हे सर्व त्याच्यात ऑटोमॅटिकमध्ये इन्व्हॉल्व टू ऑपरेशन. अबॉर्ट एक ऑपरेशन असतं आणि कमिट एक ऑपरेशन असतं. बरोबर.
ओके सर, थँक्यू.
वॉइस नाही येते का माझा? आवाज नाही येते? हेलो.
थोडा ब्रेक होत होता, पण ओके.
अभी आ रहा है क्या आवाज? हेलो.
यस सर अभी आ रहा है।
तो कंसिस्टेंसी अभी इसमें क्या आता है? द इंटीग्रिटी कंस्ट्रेंट्स are maintained so that the database is consistent before and after the transaction. अभी एटीएम का एक एग्जांपल बताया जैसे उन्होंने वहाँ पे. लेकिन ये जब तुम ट्रांज़ैक्शंस करते हैं, अलग-अलग तरह के ट्रांज़ैक्शन किए जाते हैं, तब किस तरह से ये मेंटेन किया जाता है? क्योंकि उसको मेंटेन करना बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है, नहीं तो फिर बहुत सारा लॉस हो जाएगा, कस्टमर के जो भी अमाउंट्स है, वो प्रॉपर्ली मेंटेन नहीं हो पाएगी, या जो भी है, सिस्टम वर्कआउट ना होगा प्रॉपर। So consistency, the integrity constraints are maintained so that the database is consistent before and after the transactions. The execution of transaction will leave a database in either its prior stable state or a new stable state. The consistent property of database states that every transaction sees a consistent database instances. The transaction is used to transform the database from one consistent state to another consistent state. तो consistency चाहिए. Integrity constraints are maintained so that the database is consistent. तो integrity constraint क्या होता है? हमने before some chapter we discuss about the integrity constraint. तो इसी के कारण क्या होता है, आपका डेटाबेस भी कंसिस्टेंट रहता है, मेंटेन रहता है प्रॉपर्ली, डेटाबेस में जो भी डेटा आता है वो प्रॉपर आता है बिफोर एंड आफ्टर द ट्रांजेक्शंस. Execution of transaction will leave a database in either its prior stable state or a new stable state. Execution जो होता है वो leave कब होता है? It's a prior stable state or new stable state. The consistent property of database states that every transaction sees a consistent database instance. The transaction is used to transform the database from one consistent state to another consistent state. Isolation. It shows that the data which is used to at the time of execution of transactions cannot be used by second transaction until the first one is completed. में बहुत सारे ट्रांजेक्शन आते हैं तो एट अ टाइम नहीं होते, वो एक वन बाय वन क्या किए जाते हैं, उसको एग्जीक्यूट किए जाते हैं. Execution of use at the time of execution of transaction cannot be used by second transaction until the first one is completed. जब तक पहला ट्रांजेक्शन कंप्लीट नहीं होता है तब तक सेकंड को वहाँ पे एंट्री नहीं होती, मतलब प्रोसेस नहीं होता है. इन आइसोलेशन, अभी जैसे प्रिंट करते हैं आप, एक पेज दिया, 10 पेज दिए, 100 पेज दिए, तो एट टाइम 100 पेज आते हैं क्या? वो नहीं आती. तो पहला पहला पेज आता है, फिर दूसरा पेज आता है, तीसरा, चौथा, ऐसे करके आपके 100 पेजेस आते हैं. तो ये जॉब रहती है, ये जॉब में वन बाय वन प्रोसेस होता है, फर्स्ट कम फर्स्ट सर्व के हिसाब से वो एग्जीक्यूट होता है. उसी तरह ट्रांजेक्शन में भी होता है. ट्रांजेक्शन बहुत सारे आते हैं एट ए टाइम, तो एग्जीक्यूट नहीं होते, बट दैट शुड बी दी कंप्लीटेड द फर्स्ट एंड सेकंड विल बी दी कंप्लीटेड. इस तरह से वो वर्कआउट होता है. In isolation, if the transaction T1 is being executed and using the data item X, then that data item cannot be accessed by any other transaction T2 until the transaction T1 ends. The concurrency control system of DBMS controls the isolation property. Durability. The durability property is used to indicate the performance of the database consistent state. It states that the transaction made the permanent changes. They cannot be lost by the erroneous operation of a faulty transaction or by the system failure. When a transaction is completed, then the database reaches a state known as the consistent state. That consistent state cannot be lost even in the event of systems failure. The recovery subsystem of the DBMS has responsibility of durability property. So if performance of the database consistent state is there, you state that transaction made the permanent changes. The recovery subsystem of the DBMS has the responsibility of durability property. तो ये सारे एसिड प्रॉपर्टी जो है मैनेजमेंट पर्पस के लिए बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रहते हैं. These are the desirable property of transactions. Transaction isolation levels in a database. वो अलग-अलग लेवल्स होते हैं आइसोलेशन के भी. Some other transaction may also have use value produced by the failed transaction. So we also have to roll back those transactions. The SQL standards define 4 isolation level. Okay, see here, आपका है ट्रांजेक्शन आइसोलेशन लेवल इन DBMS. तो अभी ये बेसिकली क्या है? Transactions may also have use value produced by the failed transactions. कुछ failed transactions होते हैं. So we have a rollback those transactions. The SQL standard define the 4 isolation level. Read uncommitted. Read uncommitted is the lowest isolation level. In this level, one transaction may read not yet committed changes made by other transactions, thereby allowing activities. In this level, transactions are not isolated from each others. Read committed. This isolation level guarantees that any data read is committed, now it is read. Thus, it does not allow dirty read. The transaction holds a read or write look on the current row and thus prevent other transaction from reading, updating, or deleting it. Read uncommitted, read committed, repeatable read. This is the most restrictive isolation level. The transaction hold looks on all the row it references and writes locks on all row it insert update delete. Since other transaction cannot read, update or delete these rows consequently, it avoid non-repeatable reads. तो इसमें अवॉइड होता है रिपीटेशन जो भी है रिपीटेबिलिटी ऑफ रीड इट विल बी अवॉइड नॉन रिपीटेबल रीड विल बी अवॉइड serializable. This is the highest isolation level. Serialization execution is guaranteed to be serializable. Serializable execution is defined to be execution of operation in which concurrently executing transaction appear to be serially executing. तो serializable होता है serially executing किया जाता है transactions जो भी है. There is no random system will be there. Serialization will be there for the execution of transactions. तो ये अलग-अलग read uncommitted, read committed, repeatable read. अनकमिटेड को भी रीड किया जाता है, कमिटेड को भी रीड किया जाता है, रिपीटेबल भी रीड होता है, बट serializable all the executing. Serializability. It is an important aspect of transaction. In a simple meaning, you can say that serializability is a way to check whether two transactions working on a database are maintaining database consistency or not. Maintaining the database consistency or not. If it is of two types, Conflict serializability, view serializability. Transactions serializability. It is an important aspect of transaction. In a simple meaning, we can be say that serializability is a way to check whether two transactions working on a database are maintaining the database consistency or not. If it is of two types, conflict serializability and view serializability. Complex serializability मतलब क्या? Complex serializability occurs when the order of conflicting operation, that is, operation that access the same data item and at least one of them is right, can be rearranged to create a serial schedule. A schedule is a conflict serializable if it can be transformed into a serial schedule by swapping non-conflicting operations. This type of serializability is easier to implement and check using precedence graph, where transactions are represented as nodes and directed edges indicated conflicts. View serializability is a broader concept that allows for the possibility of non-conflicting operation to be interleaved. A schedule is a view serializable if it is produced the same view of the data as the same some serial schedule, meaning that all transactions see the same data items in the same order. This type does not slowly on conflicting operation, but consider the overall effects of transaction on the database state. Checking the view serializability is a more complex and typically involves ensuring that the initial reads and final writes of transactions in the schedule match those in a serial execution. Together, these two types of serializability ensure that the concurrent execution of transactions maintain the integrity, consistency of database. तो दो अलग अलग ट्रांजेक्शंस जो उसको यहाँ पे व्यू सीरियलाइजिबिलिटी किया जाता है चेकिंग द व्यू सीरियलाइजिबिलिटी इज मोर कॉम्प्लेक्स and typically involve the ensuring that the initial reads and final writes of transaction in the schedule match those in a serial execution. Together, these two types of serializability ensure that concurrent execution of transaction maintain the integrity and consistency of the database. DBMS concurrency control. Concurrency control is the management procedures that is required for controlling concurrent execution of the operation that take place on the database. But before knowing about concurrency control, we should know the about concurrent execution. Concurrent execution in a DBMS. In a multi-user system, multiple users can access and use the same database at a time, at one time, which is known as concurrent execution. In a multi-user system, multiple users can access and use the same database. Concurrent execution in a DBMS क्या होता है कि मल्टी यूजर रहते सपोज मल्टीपल यूजर्स कैन बी एक्सेस and use the same database at a one time, which is known as concurrent execution of the database. It means that the same database is executed simultaneously. तो simultaneously execute होता है on a multi-user system by different users. While working on the database transaction, there occur the requirement of using the database by multiple users for performing different operations. And in that case, concurrent execution of the database is performed. The thing is that the simultaneous execution that is performed should be done in an interleaved manner, and no operation should affect the other executing operation, thus maintaining the consistency of the database, thus on making the concurrent execution of the transactions operation. There occur several challenging problems that need to be solved. Problem with concurrent execution. In a database transaction, the two main operation read write operation. So there is a need to manage these two operations in the data in the concurrent execution of transactions. As if these operations are not performed in an interleaved manner, and data may become consistent. So the following problem occur with concurrent execution of the operation. Problem one, lost update problem, W conflict. The problem occur when two different databases, another different two databases, suppose perform the read write operation on the same database item in a interleaved manner, that is concurrent execution, that make the values of its value of the items incorrect, hence making the database inconsistent. For example, consider the below diagram where two transactions Tx and Ty are performed on the same account A, and where the balance of account A is $300. तो यहाँ पे अलग अलग ट्रांजेक्शन है T1, T2, T7 तक. Tx is one of the transaction, Ty is another transaction. So perform the same account A, where the balance of account A is $300. So suppose read A is equal to A minus 50. Then write A. Then read A focus A is equal to A plus 100. Then write A. Lost update problem here. Means what? At a time of T1, transaction of Tx, read the value A, that is account $300 only reads. T2 transaction Tx deduct $50. यहाँ पे $50 क्या होगा, माइनस हो गया फ्रॉम अकाउंट ए, दैट बिकम्स $250. तो 250 हो गया, only deducted and not update right. यहाँ पे right update किया, so that will be $100 only because of Tx did not update the value at the time of T4. T3 में अपडेट नहीं हुआ, T4 में आ गया वापस, T4 में फिर रीड किया ही, तो रीड A क्या है 300. Tx did not update the value at the time of T4. Transaction for Ty is equal to A plus 100. Ty add that $100 account A, that becomes $50. Only added but not updated right. कहीं ऐड किया, अपडेट और वगैरह कुछ नहीं. Transaction 6. Tx write the value of account A, that will be updated $250 value, as T5 did not update the value yet. Similarly, at a T7 transaction, TY writes the value of account E. So it will write as done at the time T4. That will be $400. It means the value written by TX is lost. That is $250 is lost. Hence, data becomes incorrect and database sets to be inconsistent. Dirty read problem, WR conflict. The dirty read problem occurs when one transaction updates an item of the database and somehow the transaction failed. And before the data set gets rolled back, the update database item is accessed by another transaction. There come the read-write conflict between both the transactions. Again here, transaction TXTY is there. In the foreign diagram, performing read-write operation on account A, where the available balance is $300. Again here, T1, T2, T5 transaction, here TXTY is also transactions. Suppose at the time of T1, read A, T2 is equal to A plus 50, is write A. 300 plus 50, 350. T4, read A, server down, roll back. T5. T3, okay, T4 देखो अभी T4 में क्या हो रहा है? At the time of T4 transaction, TY reads account A. That will be read as a 350. Okay. Then at the time of T5, transaction TX rolled back due to the server problem. And the value changes back to $300 as initially. But the value for account A remains 350 for transaction. TY is committed, which is the dirty read and therefore known as dirty read problem. मतलब जो अमाउंट अपडेट होना चाहिए वो होता नहीं है, रोल बैक कमिटेड किया जाता है, but so problem will be also there. So there are so many problems in the database. तो पहला प्रॉब्लम हमने देखा लॉस अपडेट प्रॉब्लम, सेकंड dirty read problem, WR conflict, and unrepeatable read problem, WR conflict, right read conflict, also known as inconsistent retrieval problem that occurs when in a transaction two different values are read for the same database item. For example, consider two transactions, TY, TX, TY, performing the read-write operation on account T, having a available balance is equal to $300. The diagram shows below. Time T1 से लेके T5 तक एक TX, TY. Unrepeatable read problem. Again, explain for here. Unrepeatable read problem. T4 transaction TY write update value is $400. Okay. After that, T5 transaction TX read the value of account A, and that will be the read as a $400. It means that within the same transaction, TX it reads two different value of account, that is $300 initially. By the transaction, TY it reads $400. It is an unrepeatable read and is therefore known as unrepeatable read problem. Isn't it? It's very, very simple. You have to follow the steps understanding the about tables. ये टेबल दिया है वो explain करके बताया यहाँ पे कि किस तरह से अनरिपीटेबल रीड प्रॉब्लम्स क्रिएट होता है ट्रांजैक्शंस में. ये अलग-अलग ट्रांजैक्शन टीएक्सटी वाइज अ डिफरेंट ट्रांजैक्शन फॉर द डिफरेंट डेटाबेस. Just to maintain the consistency in the database and avoid such a problem that take place in a concurrent execution. ये प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व करने के लिए आपको concurrent executions जो है वो करना पड़ता है. Management is needed and that is where the concept of concurrency control comes into the role. Concurrency control protocols. The concurrency control protocol ensure the atomicity, consistency, isolation, durability, serializable of the concurrent execution of the database transaction. Therefore, these protocols are categorized as concurrency control protocol. So in the above, there are so many problems are created. So to maintain the consistency in database, avoid the such a problem that take place concurrency execution. A concurrent execution management is needed, and that is where the concept of concurrency control comes into the role. Concurrency control protocol. The concurrency control protocol ensures the atomicity, consistency, isolation, durability, and serializability of the concurrent execution of the database transaction. Therefore, these protocols are categorized as log-based concurrency control protocol, timestamp concurrency control protocol, validation-based concurrency control protocol. Locking protocol. Locking is one of the most common method for concurrency control. It prevents other transaction from accessing data until the lock is released. Exclusive locks prevent any other transaction from accessing the locked data until the lock is released. Shared locks allow multiple transactions to read the data but prevent any from modifying it. Two-phase locking, a protocol that consists of two phases, growing phase, sinking phase. Growing phase transaction can acquire locks that cannot release them. Shrinking phase transaction can release locks but cannot acquire new ones. This helps to ensure serializability. Timestamp ordering. In timestamp ordering, each transaction is assigned a unique timestamp. The system uses this timestamp to determine the order of transaction, ensuring that older transactions are prioritized. Timestamp ordering मतलब timing timestamp ordering, each transaction is assigned a unique timestamp. The system uses the timestamps to determine the order of transaction, ensuring that older transactions are priorities. Prioritize. Basic principle validation. If a transaction attempt to read write data, it checks the timestamp to ensure it does not violate the order established by previously committed transactions. Validation. At commit time, the system check whether the transactions operations are consistent within the timestamp order. Optimistic concurrency control. Optimistic concurrency control assumes that conflicts between the transaction are rare. It allows transactions to execute without blocking resources and check for conflict only at the commit stage. Phase. This read phase, validation phase, write phase. Read phase, the transaction read data and make changes in a private workspace. Validation phase, before committing, the system checks for conflicts with other transactions. Write phase, if no conflicts are found, the changes are returned to the database. Multi-version concurrency control, MVCC. The theoretical part just you to read it and understanding very well. MVCC allows multiple version of data item that exist simultaneously, enabling readers to access the last committed version without being blocked by writers. क्या हुआ? क्या? Please loudly. कुछ बोल रहे थे क्या आप? Hello? Let's talk how it works. When the transaction update data item, it create a new versions of the that item instead of writing the executing ones. Reader access the appropriate version based on the time of on their timestamp, ensuring they see consistent snapshots of the database. Wet die and wound wet schemes. These schemes manage locking based on a transaction timestamp to avoid deadlock. Wait time. Older transaction wait for younger ones to release locks. If a younger transactions request a lock held by an older, वीडियो ऑफ करो कौन है ये फातिमा सैयद वीडियो ऑफ करो आपका अदरवाइज रिव्यू मी कैसे डालो उसको अब करे बोलना वीडियो वेट डाई एंड wound wet scheme. These schemes manage the locking based on transaction timestamp to avoid relock. Wait die. Older फातिमा रिमूव कर दूंगा मैं हेलो चेक किया करो अपना वीडियो चालू है क्या wait die older transaction wait for younger ones to release locks if a younger transaction request is lock held by an older ones it is aborted skilled wound wait older transactions preemptively wound younger transactions by aborting them. They request lock on the data held by older transaction. Deadlock detection and resolution. तो इसमें बहुत सारा डेटा रहेगा है तो डेटा डेडलॉक एक्चुअली हो सकता है तो उसको रिजोल्यूशन ही किससे किया जाता है डेडलॉक मतलब क्या डेडलॉक occur when two or more transactions are waiting for each other to release the locks technique to handle the deadlock includes deadlock detections deadlock preventions deadlock detections, the system periodically checks for cycles in the wait for graph and abort one or more transaction to break the cycle. Deadlock prevention by enforcing a strict locking order or using timeout mechanisms. The system can prevent deadlocks from occurring in the first place. Database जो भी है अलग-अलग टेक्निक से व्यवहार की जाती है डेडलॉक डिटेक्शन एंड रिजोल्यूशन डेडलॉक डिटेक्शन एंड डेडलॉक प्रिवेंशन डिटेक्ट कैसे होता है और प्रिवेंशन कैसे किया जाता है चेक कैसे होता है? द सिस्टम periodically check for a cycle in the wait or graph and about one or more transaction to break the cycle. और प्रिवेंशन क्या होता है इसमें? By enforcing a strict locking order or using without timeout mechanism, the system can prevent deadlocks from occurring in the first place. Database recovery technique. Database system, like any other computer system, are subject to failure, but data stored in them must be available as and when required. When a database fails, it must passes the facilities for fast recovery. It must also have atomicity, that is, either transaction are completed successfully and committed, or the effect is recorded permanently in the database, or the transaction should have no effect on the database. Types of recovery techniques in a database. Database recovery techniques are used in a database management system to restore the database to a consistent state after the failure or error has occurred. The main goal of recovery technique is to ensure data integrity and consistency and prevent data loss. There are mainly three types of recovery techniques in use in the US. First, rollback, undo recovery techniques, commit redo recovery techniques, and checkpoint recovery techniques. ऐसे तीन अलग अलग रिकवरी के टाइप्स है। तो ये जो रिकवरी वाला लास्ट वाला टॉपिक है 7.7, will be discussed in the next lectures. Here stop the lecture. Get fine. तो नेक्स्ट लेक्चर में हम ये छोटा सा पार्ट कंप्लीट करेंगे। कुछ रिपीटेशन करना है या कुछ और एक्सप्लेन करना है तो अभी आप मुझे बताओ कि आपका 8 नंबर का लेक्चर है, 7 या 8 नंबर का लेक्चर है, और 2 लेक्चर में हमें पूरा भी जो भी है पूरा कंप्लीट करना है। मतलब नेक्स्ट लेक्चर तक हमारा पूरा कंप्लीट हो जाएगा। तो उसमें कुछ डाउट्स है, कुछ पूछना है, क्वेश्चन आंसर, तो हम वो डिस्कस करेंगे नेक्स्ट लेक्चर में, और ये पार्ट भी हम कंप्लीट करेंगे। इज इट ओके? तो
Yes, sir. Okay.
सब बताऊंगा मैं क्या क्या है, ठीक है? हाँ, तब तक
Excuse me, sir.
हाँ, यस।
Sir, is the exam on 15 January or some students were saying that it would be postponed? Is it true or sir, is it on 15 January?
Timetable will be displayed or not? You have to see the timetable, official timetable.
So officially it was said 15 January, but some students were saying it would be postponed.
So I will confirm the madam. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
And then I will send you a message. Okay. So 2 more lectures will be remaining, will be finished in the next session, and last topic will be also finished. Also will be the some doubt will be the discuss what are the patterns paper, what are the questions will be asked, importance like that. तो अभी हम डिस्कस करेंगे क्या क्या है, क्या क्या नहीं आएगा, क्या आ सकता है, क्या प्रिपेयर करना पड़ेगा आपको। बेसिकली कैसा रहता है कि अभी ये जो सब्जेक्ट है आपकी, ये आपको आगे भी लगने वाले हैं, टीवाई के बाद भी आपको ये सब यूज होने वाला है, टीवाई तक आपको ये रहने वाला है। तो बेसिकली रीड ऑल इज बेटर, बट विल बी सी अगेन उसमें और कुछ है क्या, देखते हैं। ठीक है, तो यहाँ पे आज का सेशन हम स्टॉप करते हैं। लास्ट वाला पॉइंट हम लास्ट सेशन नेक्स्ट सेशन में लेंगे और क्वेश्चन आंसर भी डिस्कस करेंगे। ओके, विल डू। ठीक है। तो यहाँ पे मैं नेक्स्ट टू सेशन में हम क्वेश्चन आंसर भी करेंगे, कुछ वापस डिस्कशन करना है टॉपिक पे, वो भी हम डिस्कस कर लेंगे। बैठो, ठीक है, चलेगा, तो लेफ्ट किया तो भी चलेगा। अच्छा, क्या हुआ अंकिता, क्या हुआ? ओके, थैंक यू ऑल ऑफ यू, थैंक्स।
Thank you, sir.
थैंक यू सर।